Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the OneLifeClub Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm Shan, and it's super exciting to be here today with a very special guest. Today we have Taryn Williams, who's joining us. She might be a familiar face to some of you, one of Australia's leading female entrepreneurs, having started several companies, exited one really recently, and also now working on a very new, exciting venture called Hash Gifted. So, welcome, Taryn. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure to have you. I think sharing your story and really diving into some of the lessons and learnings along the way is going to be so valuable to everyone listening. So thank you for making the time.
My pleasure.
I have so many questions and there's so many themes and topics I'd like to jump into with you. Especially, I guess there's some crossover between my business journey and yours, which is very exciting. But before we jump into that, it might be really good for you to just tell us a little bit about you. So tell us, like, who is Taryn Williams? What excites you when you wake up in the morning? And, what makes you feel like you're just ready to go?
Oh, big question to start.
Yeah.
I have always been an entrepreneur before I really knew what an entrepreneur was. So I've always been self-employed. I started my first business at 21. And I think what gets me excited and gets me out of bed in the morning is solving problems. Like, I really love having ideas, bringing people and resources and technology around problems to solve them. So I get so excited about new ideas. Every time I meet people, they'll commonly joke, like, I try and convince everyone to start businesses. I'm like, oh, you could be doing this, or you've got this amazing skill set, or I try and rope them into one of my startups. So I think I just have a natural passion for innovation and technology and startups, and that's probably what gets me out of bed in the mornings at the moment.
That's amazing. I really resonate with that. Like, I think the idea of being a problem solver and the challenge that that brings every day is just so exciting. Like the thrill and adrenaline of knowing that you can kind of get to the bottom of a problem and kind of find the best solution is also what makes me excited. Um, I loved hearing that you started your journey so young. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? What was it like? Take us back to when you were 21 and you decided to do your own thing for the first time.
Yeah, so I'd been modeling myself and working as a producer as well, producing campaigns for a top fashion and editorial photographer in Australia. And I just kind of had so many pain points and friction points in the industry. And I thought, oh, well, I can do this better. I'll just start my own agency. Obviously, blissful naivety of youth. You don't know what you don't know. And so I thought, well, I'm going to start my own modeling agency. And there was a few sort of key reasons why. Agencies and models and their clients sort of didn't have a great relationship generally in the industry. It was a little bit ruled by fear, and the biggest pain point for models was really the length of time it took to get paid. So generally they wouldn't get paid until about 90 days after a job. And I just thought that was really insane. I sort of thought, well, why? It doesn't happen in any other industry. Why would we have to wait until the client pays the production company and the production company pays the modeling agency? Just didn't make sense to me. So I thought, well, I'll just start my own agency and I'll treat everyone with decency and respect. I'll build like a really beautiful fostering environment, treat everyone like a family, and we'll pay everyone in 7 days. Surely it can't be that hard. So that was the whole idea behind Wink. Still the premise that we operate on today. We still pay every single week. And yeah, the business has got about 600 models Australia-wide now, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and it's sort of grown year on year every year since.
Wow. I get one of the most common questions that I get asked by people who are wanting to start their first startups is what problem should I solve? And for me, when I get asked that question, it's such a hard question for me to answer because when I started my first company, I was solving a problem that I experienced. And it sounds like you knew the problem that you were solving so intimately as well. What are your thoughts on that? So if an entrepreneur said to you, I want to start a business or I want to start my first startup, what should I do? How do you normally answer that question?
I think having deep domain expertise in something really, really helps. So if you intimately know an industry and you know the friction points and the pain points, either because you've worked in it yourself and so it's a true pain that you've felt, or it's something that you have seen, friends in, partner in, whatever it might be. I think that really, really helps. Obviously, of course, there's other ways to go about it. There's identifying international business models that might work here, or business models that could be applied to a different sector. But I think the benefit of having that deep domain expertise and really understanding the pain of your potential customer makes building a product that solves that problem so much easier, and also understanding the sort of go-to-market messaging that would resonate and work. So yeah, I just think being aware in your day-to-day life and looking at things that could be improved, systems, processes, pain points, touch points in your day-to-day life that you think could be done better.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I totally agree. I feel like being an expert in your craft goes such a long way because it makes it easier for you to understand how to solve problems in the best way in that space.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but something you touched on earlier actually really resonated with me too. You said, I think you mentioned something about the naivety of starting a business young. And I love that too. Like, I love meeting founders who are kind of, stumbling into something for the first time and are looking at it with a fresh pair of eyes and aren't kind of jaded by what they've seen before.
Yeah.
So tell me about your perspective on that and your experience being a young founder, probably navigating all these things that were very different for the first time.
Yeah, the first time around, you do have that blissful naivety. You really don't know. One, you don't know how hard it's going to be. You don't know all the things that you don't know. So you
Mhm.
just, for me, it was like, God, I didn't know we had to get public liability insurance, or I
Mhm.
didn't know how to build a financial model. There was all of these things that you were sort of learning for the first time, which you could either let overwhelm you and become really stressful, or you could treat it as a really exciting learning opportunity. And I always joked that it was like a really expensive MBA. Like, I could
Yeah.
have gone and I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on building a tech product to power Wink models, and I was like, well, I could have gone and done an MBA to learn all of this, or I'm going to learn it hands on the job. And I
Yeah.
think as you go, and the more companies that I start or that I'm involved in, certain things become easier. You know a lot of the things that you need to do. So second time, third time, fourth round, it gets a lot easier. You can identify a lot of the trends or problems more quickly. You've got a great network and access to resources that you probably didn't have the first times around. But you're also probably a little bit more jaded and a little bit more realistic. So there's cost benefit analysis to both, being a first time founder versus a third or fourth time founder. I think there's pros and cons on both.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that's so special about and unique about your experience is that you have the experience of, starting really young, and kind of looking at the world through fresh eyes. But now you've done it so many times. There's so much kind of acquired knowledge and probably lots of crossover and things that, worked the first time and worked second and third time, but also things that didn't. So I'm curious to hear about the rest of your story. I know we stopped kind of with Wink, but would love to hear more and take us on that journey through, the different businesses that you've built, and kind of take us also to where you are right now with Hash Gifted.
Absolutely. So I built an end-to-end onboarding, calendar management, and payroll integration software for Wink, this big, complex, heavy tool, because there was just nothing out there at the time. This is probably, 12 years ago, that powered modeling agencies or any kind of shift worker freelance talent platform. And so I custom built one, as you do. I just, non-technical founder, I went out and got a few quotes and I'm going to build this huge piece of software. And it was really painful. It was really expensive. I had no idea what I was doing. But at the end of the build, it completely transformed that business. It meant we could represent, a huge number of models on a very lean headcount. We had such a lower opportunity for human error. We had all of this data that was so useful to be able to make informed decisions in the business. And it really streamlined the experience for both our client and our talent side. So got to the end of the build and I was like, okay, well, that was really painful, but I absolutely loved solving this business problem using technology.
Mm-hmm.
And it was sort of around the time that Freelancer had just launched and Airtasker had just launched. And I was like, oh God, maybe I should have made this an open platform where clients could just post their own job into this tech platform and match with models and sort of bypass the agency. So that was sort of the idea for my next business, which was called The Right Fit, came from,
Mm-hmm.
which was a platform that you could post a job and find all different kinds of creative talent. So photographers and models and makeup artists and stylists and influencers, all in one place. So very much like an Airtasker or an Upwork. And we had about 11,000 clients and about 17,000 talent when I sold that business about a year ago now, nearly a year ago. And we raised venture capital, scaled that business, and really learned the big difference between scaling a traditional sort of small business, a talent agency, which had been cash flow positive the entire time. As it grew, we hired more staff, versus growing a high growth tech company, which was venture capital founded, raised multiple rounds of capital, had a very different growth trajectory, was a pure play technology business at its core. So I learned a lot of things through that journey. And then I was starting to see this one vertical on that platform was influencers. And there was a real shift, obviously, towards influencer marketing and brands wanting to do more in that space. But there was also a lack of understanding and awareness yet on how to do that really well. So I started another business, a full service agency that was called the Influencers Agency, which I also sold. And basically we ran end-to-end campaigns for clients. So they could come to us and say, look, we've got $50,000 and we want to launch this new product or service. This is our target audience. And we would go and find them all of the right influencers. We were platform and agency agnostic. So we worked with all of the agencies, all freelance talent, any people on platforms, and we would do all of the vetting negotiation for them and then present them back a fully vetted list of talent and then manage the campaign end to end. So briefing the influencers, managing content approvals, post-campaign reporting, blah, blah, blah. So that was my next business. And part of that one was recognizing that there was a lot of great brands that wanted to do contra gifting, so unpaid collaborations. So they might be a really amazing hotel that were doing free hotel stays, or clothing brands that were gifting clothing. And on the flip side, I'm a small influencer myself. I have about 22,000 followers, and I would get sent a lot of products and items to the office from brands. And then there would be other times where I would need something. I'd be going to a red carpet event and I'd want to loan a dress from a brand, for example. And there wasn't sort of a streamlined way to make that happen. So it was very fragmented. And I thought, oh, here's another opportunity. I know I shouldn't do another business, but I could just see that it was a problem to be solved. So that was where the idea for Hash Gifted came from. So essentially that business on the brand side is a platform they can go to. If they have Shopify, they can connect their Shopify store, but they certainly don't need to. And they can decide what they're willing to gift. So a night's hotel stay or this makeup set, X, Y, and Z. The parameters, so minimum number of followers, gender, state, location, which platform, Instagram, TikTok, etc. And then for influencers, it's like a dating app. They just swipe left and right on goodies that they might like to receive. So they're opting in to receive items. So once the two parties match, then they can chat back and forth and say, hey, I'll send you these items in exchange for a get ready with me reel. Creator says, yep, cool, that sounds great. And then at the end of the campaign, we capture all of the content as well. So we pull all of that into the platform in one place for a brand to make it so much easier. And then both parties leave ratings or reviews. So streamlining gifting. So that's my current baby that I'm working on.
That's wonderful. I mean, I think, the whole influencer marketing space is super interesting, and obviously is a real backbone of the marketing strategy for most businesses today. So it's amazing to see kind of innovation in that space that helps give brands more flexibility to work with creators, but also the creators more flexibility to be able to choose which brands they want to work with that align with their goals. So that's, it sounds like every step of this journey for you has really been about solving problems that you've identified yourself as things that are opportunities to be improved on.
Yeah, I sort of identify these little opportunities or trends, or I can see like a macro opportunity, like obviously from the modeling agency shifting into seeing the growth and trend of influencers and social content and how that was going to shape the sort of broader talent industry. And I just have this, I find them that they're like an itch that I can't not scratch. I see these ideas and I'm like, oh, I just need to get my hands in and get dirty and build out a solution for this.
That's amazing. And I feel like that is such an inspiring mindset to have, because I feel like for a lot of people, I'm just, focusing on one thing for a really long period of time, and seeing one thing succeed is satisfying. But for people like you who have a mind, a very kind of creative mind, and really focused on problem solving, being able to scale the impact you have across multiple ventures is probably really exciting for you. I'd love.
Very exhausting. Sometimes I always think there's a benefit to just doing one thing, do it well, and then retire or take a step back.
I don't
So
know. I mean, that's a really great kind of question too. If you have you ever thought about, retiring, and what's kind of what's been your thinking process around that? Is that something that you've considered doing, or are you kind of always thinking about what's next?
yeah, well, I'm supposed to be on a sabbatical at the moment. I was supposed to take a 12-month sabbatical after selling the Right Fit and the influencers agency. And it was just as Gifted was ready to launch. And so I was like, oh, I'll just help launch the business. And then, we have a great team in that business that could run it without me. And I sort of got sucked a little bit back in. Look, to be honest, I'm clearly a workaholic. So I think that there's some self-reflection to do there in terms of, why I throw myself into new ventures and why I don't feel as comfortable just, taking a day off or going and laying on the beach or not having plans, So I think there's some probably pretty unhealthy behaviors in there that need to be addressed. And, I think there's a part of me that derives a lot of satisfaction from working hard and seeing the fruits of that labor, and also, seeing my team grow and develop, and mentoring others. And I get the opportunity to sit on a lot of boards now, which, I so enjoy, and which gives me exposure to different industries. But yes, you can hold me to it that I'm saying at the end of June, I'm going to take a sabbatical. So let's see if that
Wow,
actually happens.
that's a very exciting big step.
Yeah.
We have a very diverse group of people who are part of our One Life Club community, and I have met some really wonderful entrepreneurs who have been in a very similar phase in their journey, kind of, having exited one business and thinking about what they do next. And it's been really interesting because I went through that journey myself with my first business, Crimson Education, and I guess one of the big questions that I asked myself was, what is my purpose?
Mm,
Because that kind of is like the underlying trend, or more like a thread that kind of connected everything that I'd done.
yeah.
How do you think about that? Like, how do you think about your purpose and the legacy that you want to leave behind as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, it's such a great point. And I've just been reading a book at the moment that's it's called The Second Mountain. And I wish I could remember who it's by, but I'll look it up for you later.
Mm.
And it really talks a lot about this. Like, you have your first mountain, which is usually sort of commercial success and all of the stuff that you think is going to give you happiness and true joy, all the money and trappings and whatever. And then your second mountain is really about, what are my values? What is my purpose? What is going to give me sustained and long-term, consistent joy and true happiness? And that's a much harder thing to identify. I think the first mountain is usually pretty easy. I want this type of house, this type of car, this kind of life, these kind of holidays. And then you step back and you go, okay, what is going to give me this deep, true, lasting joy for a long period of time? And I've been doing a lot of work on this and reflecting on it a lot, because I think for me, it's really about connections, the human connection that we have with friends and partners and family, and how you invest in those relationships in a meaningful way. And then the kind of impact that I want to leave on the world, and what's important to me in terms of, philanthropic endeavors, involvement in the arts, mentoring others, helping the sort of next generation of entrepreneurs and startups come through. So it's a constant work in progress, I think, is my true and honest answer there. But I think something that you have to be really mindful of, because it can be very easy, as I'm sure you've experienced, to just keep running in one direction, and not sort of get off the treadmill and take a step back and go, is this bringing me true, sort of lasting, meaningful joy?
And I think that's one of the biggest and probably most challenging questions that anyone can ask themselves, and hopefully, the most rewarding question to be able to answer, what is it that actually makes me feel really fulfilled? Something that I've observed is that for many people, that's such a journey. Like I know in our community, we have lots of entrepreneurs who are building their first business. And you're right, it can be such a feeling of being on a treadmill when you're, in the weeds every day and focused on the tasks that are right in front of you. But a really inspiring woman once said to me when I was working in my first startup at Crimson, she said, Chandra, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to imagine your team and your company as a sports game. So imagine, every day when you show up at the office, you're playing a game and you're the captain of the team and you're trying to steer the team towards success. So you're trying to make sure that, you win the game and you score as many points as you can. And most of the time you're on the field. But she said, today I want you to walk yourself off the field and go sit on the bleachers and just watch the game play out and see what happens. And it was the most profound analogy that I'd ever thought of, because I'd
I like
always been in
that.
the detail.
Yeah.
But really sitting on the bleachers and kind of just observing what was going on for my team, and also what was going on for me. I'm kind of watching my team. Was where some of that kind of deep thinking around my purpose and my impact really happened. Have you ever had a moment like
I
that? Like,
love that. That's such a great analogy. And
yeah.
also giving you that sort of 30,000 foot view, because I think as an entrepreneur, it can be very hard to go from 3,000 foot, you're in the detail, you're, whatever it might be, helping with a customer service issue.
Mhm.
And then you're trying to take this 30,000 step view and look back and get like a much more macro view of the world, and what role do you play in it? How is the company performing overall?
Yeah.
How's each individual division performing? So I love that. It's such a great analogy.
Yeah, it's so good, and it even goes as far as thinking, like now that I'm sitting on the bleachers and I can see my team on the field, and I can see where there's room for improvement and where we're doing really well. From the bleachers, I can actually also see the other side of the field where my family are and where my
Mm,
friends are and where my hobbies might be, or where my philanthropic interests might be, and being able to really see how all of these things are kind of happening at the same time and unfolding at the same time, I think is quite powerful as well.
yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think I had to get over the idea of being able to get some sort of status quo and stability in all things at all times, and just
Mhm.
accept that that was never going to be the case. I might have the business performing really well, but my health might be compromised, or
Mm.
my relationships might be suffering at the time, or I might have whatever it might be. There would constantly be something in your life that was sort of out of kilter, and I
Mm.
had always wanted this, probably the true perfectionist streak in me, wanting to have everything under control and bedded down, and just accepting that that was not life. You're never going to get that perfect stability, everything humming along perfectly across all elements of your life. You've just got to roll the punches on a day-to-day basis, try and move all of the balls forward as best you can, and be able to, I guess, take a step back and go, which one of these areas needs my attention at the moment, and what's urgent versus what's critical.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that urgent versus critical kind of calculus is such an
Mm.
important kind of mental routine to get yourself into.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's so hard, isn't it? Because there's a real dopamine hit and jumping in and fixing something instantaneously, because it's
yeah,
like, oh, this is a quick fix, I can do that, versus going, is this the best use of my time? Is this
exactly.
really what I should be focused on now? Or should I do that thing over there that's, slightly more complicated, slightly more mentally taxing, not going to give me that immediacy of reward, but is actually far more important?
Yeah, and also being honest with yourself about like why you gravitate towards solving specific problems first. Like
Yeah.
I found that I love doing the things that I was good at.
Yeah.
And so I would do those first, and then I'd just like be stacked up towards the end of my day for all the stuff that I didn't enjoy.
Yeah.
But
No, I'm
when
so
I
guilty.
kind of got that mental, calculation right, it really changed things. Something else that I found quite interesting is the idea of consistency, and like how important having
Mm.
consistency is in building a business. And very very much related to what you just talked about. One of the things that I found quite helpful is realizing that consistency looks different every day. So it doesn't mean like showing up and being able to give, everything 100% every single day as much as we want to. It's really hard to give that to every single bucket. But just showing up and recognizing that every day, consistency is the fact that you show up, and some things might get 80% on one day and 60% on another. And on the 60% day in one of the buckets, something else might be getting 80%.
So
What are your thoughts on that?
it's so consistent. I don't do New Year's resolutions, but I do a word of the year. And it's
Okay.
supposed to be the overarching theme for what I want to focus on this year.
Mm.
And for the last 2 years, because I didn't nail it the year before, my word has been consistency.
Oh,
So,
wow. What are the
yeah, so
chances?
quite ironic, yes. Because I couldn't agree more with that in that I can have a habit and a tendency of going all in really hard on one particular thing, whether that's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get really into health and wellness and biohacking and take all the supplements and see all the experts and have a kinesiologist and a naturopath and a dietitian and a this and that, and then absolutely burn out, and go too hard on too many things in that area. And so, yes, for the last 2 years, my word has been consistency and just trying to be a really good friend, a really good co-worker, a really good boss, a really good citizen in the world, and trying to just go, as you said, I'm never going to nail 100% of things all of the time. But instead of giving one thing 80% of my attention and then every other element of my life having to pick up, the scraps of what's left, trying to be a little bit more equitable in the distribution of my time and energy and effort across all of those things on a regular basis.
And I think that intention is so powerful. It's hard to do that all the time, but just being conscious of the fact that that's something you want to do is an achievement in itself.
Yeah,
That's
that's right. And
amazing.
I'm trying. I definitely don't get it right. No, I would say it's probably going to be the word of the year next year as well. Let's be honest. But
Well,
I
that's
think, as you
the
say,
nature of consistency, is to keep that consistent, I guess.
yeah, I think it's the awareness, as you say, of this is the intention and the goal, irrespective of whether I get it right every single day. It's coming back to that on a regular basis and saying, how can I try and be more equitable with my time and energy on a really not just today, but this week, this month, this year.
That's amazing. How I know you're really involved in the startup space, and I think for a lot of people who are watching this, some of your insights into, what you've seen in terms of successful founders and the traits that they have and the habits that they have would be really interesting. So I'd love to hear, even if you just reflect on your experience with fish burners, what are some of the things that kind of come to mind immediately when you think of some of the most successful entrepreneurs that you've come across?
Yeah, look, and I'm so fortunate to be on the board at Fishburners. There's so many incredible startups that come through the family there, and obviously we do everything we can to wrap them in success to make them successful and help them on that journey. But I think there are some sort of common traits in founders, and it's really hard to know whether it's born or made, nature versus nurture. But I think some of the really common ones are grit and tenacity. So the ability to get back up and dust yourself off when things don't go well, because that is the case in startups. You are going to come up against so many challenges, and that is such a huge part of the journey. So I think being able to be gritty and be tenacious, having resilience, the ability to build and maintain really good networks, both professionally and personally, because I think without a good community and good support network around you, it's very, very hard to succeed. Success rarely happens in a silo. And I think at the moment, probably one of the big ones is just a willingness to adapt and learn and be open to both new information, new challenges, and new opportunities, because obviously none of us know what is going to happen with AI. None of us know what's going to happen with so many of the advents of new technology and across so many different sectors. But that desire, seeing that as something that is exciting and having a desire to learn and explore these things, I think is what sets apart people who not want to bury their heads in the sand, because that's a little bit dramatic, but who are not open to exploring some of these things and are just, I guess, a little bit more resistant. And so I think the founders that I see who are really successful and are able to adapt and pivot and embrace some of these things and incorporate them are the ones who are out proactively looking for new information, identifying new trends, working with new tools. And I think that really sets them apart from other founders.
That's a really interesting point around adaptability, and I guess more specifically the impact of the very dynamic environment we're living in with tech and how
Mm.
quickly it's changing our everyday. How do you think about what that might mean for a traditional business? Like, I'll give you some context. We've got, a bunch of our members in the One Life Club community who have been building and nurturing, traditional businesses that are growing really steadily year on year and are solving problems for people day to day. So, for example, we've got founders who run really successful plumbing businesses or have been working in the textile space for a really long time, or
Yeah.
maybe work in the building and construction industry. And I think with those businesses, they're so important. But
Mm.
obviously, there's so much room for disruption. How do you think about like the intersection between optimizing a traditional business and all the advancements in AI that are happening at the moment?
Yeah, look, and I think probably the brutal hard truth is that if you are not disrupting, you're going to be disrupted. And I think that sort of applies in generally across all businesses. I
Mm.
think probably the first step is to try and become as aware of what the opportunities and threats are in your industry. So
Mm.
it can be as simple as, obviously, there's so much free, great content out there now on how some of these tools can be applied. I think trying to break down this idea that, AI is not just, text generation or image generation. And then just one of the things we've been doing is sitting down and just trying to look at all of the touch points in our business, all of the systems and processes. Where are things that are low value and easy to operationalize and potentially use AI or other sort of tech advancements to streamline those and remove either key man dependency, opportunity for human error, or just systemize and streamline a process for efficiency and scale. So it can be as simple as sitting down and writing out what those things could be in your individual business, and then going and doing some research and thinking about, okay, are there existing tools out there that I could use? Do I need to get a consultant in to help me with this? And how can you just stay ahead of that curve so that you're I suppose, at cause in your industry as opposed to being affected. You are taking control of your destiny and going, we don't want to be left behind. I think is probably the first and least scary place to start, is just having some awareness and thinking about how it could apply to your business.
I totally agree. And one of the things that I love to kind of hold as like a key value of mine is default to action.
Yeah.
In kind of every area of problem solving and entrepreneurship. What do you think default to action could look like for someone who is a solo founder running a traditional business who really wants to just be like more in touch with tech and more in touch with AI? Like, what are some of the things that they could decide today I'm going to explore, today I'm going to do?
Love this. And I have such a bias for action as well. And it's probably the one thing that really grinds me is when you meet people and they just don't have that, because I'm like, I cannot understand how you view the world and how you, so I think there's so many really easy things you can do. So carve out some time in your day, whether it's your, time at the gym or your train ride to the office or whatever it might be, to upskill yourself on a particular thing. And so for me at the moment, I've been obsessed with American politics and the election. I want to know more about that and go really deep into understanding that. And so I've just curated a list of podcasts that I'm going to work through over the next 2 weeks to be,
Wow.
really deeply understand the dynamics and mechanisms there. So just go, whether it's AI, whether it's, generative content, whether it's machine learning or LLMs, like just pick a topic and go, I want to really deeply understand this. Podcasts are great because it's such a passive way of learning. But you might be a written learner or a visual learner. So pick your poison. There's so many great tools out there. Imprint is a fantastic app as well, where you can just it has like lots of best-selling novels like The Body Keeps Score and Clayton Christensen's book, and so you can just go through and it sort of visualizes them into snippety little 10-minute cards that you can swipe through and learn the key takeaways from. So And try and train your algorithms as well. So your TikTok and Instagram algorithm, I wish I was strong enough to just say I'm going to delete them and I don't have them on my phone, but clearly I don't have that level of self-control. But I do try and use the time for good. Of course, we're all guilty of, a little bit of doom scrolling, but if you can train your algorithm to present you with content that's engaging and learning and educational and informative, actually you can be using that time to consume really interesting pieces of content, whether it's news or educational content. So I think just make time for it and make it something that you value and that you enjoy. So do it in a way that is enjoyable for you.
That's so helpful. I loved what you said about picking a topic and going really deep over a 2 week period. Because I find that I'm quite similar. Like I'm very curious. But once I start kind of scratching the surface on something, I just want to get to the bottom of it,
Yeah.
as quickly as I can. And sometimes the topics are so like different to my everyday. So I think it's really cool. I feel like, part of being able to grow your business in the best way and grow your career in the right way is so intertwined with your own personal development. So
I couldn't agree more.
yeah,
Couldn't
like
agree more. I think,
how do you how do you think about that? Like balance it.
yeah, and like I've been doing a deep dive at the moment into geopolitics, just sort of more broadly as well. And I've just been reading a book on it's called The Chips War,
Mhm.
on how silicon chips are manufactured and how that affects sort of global supply chains and geopolitics between nations. And so it's something like that that sort of keeps me abreast of thinking more holistically about the industry that I operate in, technology, where there might be opportunities for new businesses, where there's potentially risks, and things that are really, really important for both my career and portfolios of companies that I work with or invest in. And if I don't have this knowledge, then I can't possibly be making the right long-term strategic decisions. So
Mm.
I think it's sort of not siloing education or self-learning or self-development as something that you just should do, but seeing that it actually benefits so many other areas of your life, whether it's your relationships, your career, your investments. I think that they're all intertwined so importantly.
I totally agree. And I think one thing that we always read about and we hear about and we talk about is the impact of what's happening in the economy and kind of the macro factors on our businesses. But what's really interesting is when we start to understand the dynamics that impact our
Yeah.
businesses, we can understand like what we can control and what we can't control and how we mitigate those risks.
I could,
Um,
yeah, totally.
mm,
Understanding the levers. And I think, because otherwise, I think it can be easy as a business owner to hear words in the press or this scam, we're going to have an economic downturn or there's going to be a recession, interest rate rises. If you don't sort of deeply understand those concepts and you don't understand the levers that you have, if any, in your business or commercial world to control for those factors, it makes it's very disempowering and it can become very scary. And so it feels like a very uncertain, scary, intimidating time, as opposed to going, well, these are the things that are within my control, these are the things that are not, and these are the indicators that I need to look for. Like, the number of jobs posted on your platform that week, or the number of people that have signed up, or the number of incoming calls that you're getting. When you start to see these trends, okay, I know what this means and I know how to adjust for it because I know the levers in my business.
Totally. Something that I love to do is when I'm mapping out goals for my business or a business that I'm working on or that I've invested in, is to map out a KPI, like the high level goals for the company that is strategic and makes sense over the next quarter or 1 year. But something else that goes alongside that I think is so important is also identifying what the leading indicators are as opposed to the lagging
Yes.
indicators.
Yes.
So and I feel like those leading indicators kind of give you a heads up almost about what's to come. And one of the big kind of themes is capital raising and businesses having sufficient cash flow. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing in that space right now and
Mm.
kind of the investor market? I know that's something a lot of our founders are interested in.
Yeah, and of course there was obviously the grand reset,
Yeah.
sort of 18 months ago, and we've seen valuations come off to a much more sort of realistic level. Obviously, there was was pretty frothy, and we saw a lot of companies raising at crazy valuations. So I think we've definitely seen that come off. The average check size has reduced. It is harder for companies to raise capital if they don't have a clear path to profitability. And in some ways, I think that is a good thing, and I respect that, and it is important that we're building sustainable, profitable businesses that do have a path to profitability. I do worry that it means as a nation, we will have great ideas that go unfounded, and that don't have an opportunity to see the light of day because they can't receive funding, and what that means for us long term, on a global scale, of being sort of thought leaders and building great innovative companies and not having the support for our founders. So I think we are seeing a lot of shifts in this space. I see more and more founders raising capital internationally because it's easier to get access. It'll be interesting to see what sort of government support that we get for entrepreneurship, innovation, if there's going to be any changes to R&D. And so, look, I think that if you have a great idea, you have a robust team, and you have a robust business model and a path to success, I think you will always get funded. I shouldn't say always. But your likelihood of success in achieving funding will be better than those who don't have those things. And I think it's probably just more about being a little bit more realistic and conservative in how we have to build businesses at the moment. With Hash Gifted, we've certainly built the platform in a much different way than we did with the Right Fit. And, we hired a really big team from day one, and we built far more than an MVP. And in Hash Gifted, we really built an MVP. We tested it. We started, charging customers and making sure that the business had a little bit more of a product market fit before we started to go all in on building out complex algorithms or anything like that. So it's just potentially a little bit more of a conservative build, I think, this time around. So, but there's also so much great information online now about capital raising than there was, I don't know, I first raised about 8-9 years ago, got 10 maybe. And there's so much more access to information and examples of what a great, Series A deck looks like, or a seed deck, and how to build a great financial model, and making sure that you really understand those deep, financial metrics and drivers of your own business. So whilst the barriers to accessing capital may have increased, I think the barriers to information that would make you successful in capital raising has decreased. So hopefully they in some way balance each other out.
That's really interesting. I really resonate with the point around innovation and how important it is to kind of find channels to foster innovation where potentially the risk appetite would need to be a little bit higher than, say, a more conservative business that has a clearer pathway to profitability. But I guess that's the nature of, living in a world where markets can be quite cyclical. So it's, I think, definitely a really interesting time. I'd love if you could share 3 tips. So, if a founder's watching this and they're thinking, having access to a bit more capital could really help to accelerate our business, help us achieve profitability sooner, or maybe just grow our top line and get more of, those high value customers on board. What would be your tips, I guess, from the other side of the table, if they were thinking about approaching investors, to kind of doing that in the right way?
I think coming with a really robust plan of what you're going to use those funds for. So being very, very clear about the executional plan for the next sort of 12 to 24 months of the business, and being able to speak hand on heart to your business plan and your financial model to me when I'm looking at investments is really, really important to me. This does not mean that you by any means need to be, a financial expert or be able to build your own model from scratch. I don't expect that, but I do expect founders to be able to understand the key metrics of their business and be able to talk to that. Like, I know that if I reduce churn, I will be able to do these things, and then therefore I believe I can get the business to here by this time. So I think that's probably one of the really, really important things. Like, have a very clear plan, very clear understanding of what you're going to use the capital for that you've raised for. Have a really detailed financial model and an IM. I think, as I said, there's so much great information now online about what to include in an IM. And be transparent with your concerns about the business or the areas that you need help with, and identify strategic investors that might be able to help with those things. So if your biggest concern is that you're a non-technical founder and you would like support from investors who have technical expertise, well then be really transparent with them in those conversations and say, whilst capital is important to us, we would also really like, some hands-on support in these particular areas. Or if it's about international expansion, finding an investor that can help open doors in those new markets. So I think thinking strategically about who the people you're reaching out to for capital and customizing your message to them is really important as well. I think the blanket send out approach is a no-go. I think probably also the last one is that raising capital and taking investment from someone is like a marriage. It's a long-term relationship and not one that you can easily get divorced from. So I think spend a lot of time dating. I always say to founders who are I'm mentoring a little looking to raise capital is get out in market a long time before you need to raise capital and start having conversations, meeting people, having coffees, getting to know them, because someone that you think might be a fantastic investor for your company, you might meet and go, that didn't resonate at all. It doesn't seem like they really understand our mission, doesn't really understand like there's a values alignment here. I think the more coffee meetings and the more of those sort of sounding out conversations that you can have before you're ready to go and raise makes the process so much easier. Firstly, they're a warm contact. They know you. You've had an opportunity to get them to understand the business and the vision. But also, if they're going to be the right fit long term for your business.
Absolutely. And I think for a lot of first time founders who are raising capital, those coffee meetings and just kind of having the number of chats about potentially doing a round, or sharing sharing a little bit more about your company also teaches you is what's important to an investor. Because if
Yes.
you don't know, you don't know. And actually, the awareness of knowing what's important to an investor actually becomes what's important to you as an entrepreneur who's trying to build a business in the best possible way. And so
So
that's
true.
something that I've learned along the way too.
Yeah, it really helps you sort of pressure test and validate the idea. Like if you have lots and lots of people, if you're building a marketplace and lots of people are saying, hey, look, your churn here looks concerning, or it looks like we're seeing a decrease in valuation in marketplaces, or we're seeing marketplaces going really deep into particular verticals, or it really helps you shape your product roadmap, the things that you need to be focusing on to get a successful raise done. And these people are seeing so many businesses in so many different verticals and markets. It's a really quick way to gain a lot of information that you wouldn't have been able to otherwise access.
I totally agree. And I think for a lot of people, the starting point to those conversations is really just like connecting with the right people and having the confidence to ask for a conversation. So I always say that, going back to default to action, one of the best things that you can do is never be afraid of sending someone a message on LinkedIn. Um,
Totally.
and that's kind of one of the things that helped kind of guide me early on in my career, that definitely helped a lot. And yeah, I think that whole networking piece is so important.
I also believe people are inherently good and they want to help others. And so I think, if you send someone a cold request on LinkedIn and say, look, can I have 30 minutes of your time? I'll come to you. I'd love to have a coffee. Obviously, come with a clear ask. I'd like to talk about these three things, or I'd like to show you through X, Y, and Z. And this is why I think you're the right person for this meeting. And if you're not, could you connect me to the right person in your company to have it with? Most people will say yes. Most people will say, I see this person, they've spent time understanding why I'm the right person to have this conversation with. They're asking for insights, feedback, expertise, learnings. Yes, I'll take a 30-minute coffee meeting with you.
Absolutely. And I also feel like I get some of those messages sometimes too. And it's so amazing to also hear about the journey that other people are on, and to be able to support that too. So yeah, I think there's no harm in sending someone a cold message and asking to sit down with them for a coffee. I know I'm conscious of time, and I do have two big questions for you that I'd love
Oh,
to end with. The first one is I'd love to hear about um, one piece of advice that you'd give to your 21-year-old self. Imagine you're about to embark on this journey of entrepreneurship. What would you want yourself to know if you could go back in time and share something with you?
I think honestly, probably to enjoy the journey a little bit more and stop being so focused on the destination. I think for the
Mm.
first 10 years of my career, I was so focused on what's next, what's next, what's next, what's the next biggest goal, what's the next milestone, as opposed to really stopping and celebrating any of the incremental victories along the way. There were
Mm.
so many amazing things that we achieved, and I never stopped to celebrate any of those or take stock, or it was all about what was next. So I remember, when we raised our very first round of capital,
Mhm.
we didn't celebrate. You were straight on to, now we need to execute, now we need to deploy, now we need to hire, as opposed to really, taking stock and going, hey, we did that and we've built something that's, people want to invest in. So I think, yeah, that would probably be the main thing, saying just stop and enjoy the journey a little bit more. Stop rushing forward.
I think that's such great advice because I feel like, it's very much in the trait or the characteristics of like a high achieving person or type A personality, to always be thinking about what's coming next. But if you get stuck in the cycle of always focusing on tomorrow, you never really ever enjoy tomorrow because there's always a tomorrow
Yeah,
after that.
so true.
Um, so I totally agree. And I think that's so important for people to hear and such an important message for us to be reminding people of. So thank you for sharing that. My last question is an equally exciting one, but one that has really been a very big motivating factor for us here at One Life Club and for the One Life Club team, because I guess we all share like, a passion around making the most of every day. But I'd love to hear what having one life actually means to you.
I think it's probably about getting really, really clear on what your values are. I spent a lot of time doing this early in my career. I had a fantastic mentor who really made me sit down and get very, very clear about what my personal values were and how they were going to show up for me every single day, both personally and professionally. And I've tried to live really, really true to those values. There's, definitely times where you get off track. But I think for me, sort of the concept of having one life is really that you really do only get one roll of the dice. You only get one chance to do this.
Mhm.
And really trying to be very clear and true and honest with myself about how I'm showing up every single day and how I'm executing those values, and being reflective, I think. Am I maximizing this one opportunity that I get on this planet?
Wow, I think that is the most powerful way that we can end our chat with you because I totally agree. I think we all really only have one opportunity to make the most of this life. And, we all want to leave behind a legacy that we can be really proud of. And it sounds like you are well on your way to doing that. And you already have left behind such a legacy with everything that you've built. So thank you for
Thank
your time.
you. Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's been absolutely wonderful. I know that everyone watching this is going to learn so much from this podcast, and we're really grateful that you were able to come and share, but also so openly share. It sounds like such an exciting time in your career. We're all going to be watching. Really, we're going to be sitting at the edge of our seat, seeing how things go with this next venture.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you for making time. You're such an inspiration too. So it was wonderful to
Oh,
chat.
thank you! Amazing. Thank you, Taryn.
Awesome. That was great.
Awesome.
Thank
That was
you.
so fun.